prompt into the chat because we've all gotten these, but I would love to hear other people's experience. Um, what sort of kind of AI generated emails have you received lately or outbound of any kind, maybe a LinkedIn message that felt either too AI or perfect because of AI? And I'd love to get the group's feedback on what was that like? And is it AI slop or did it hit the mark? So
I'm
here's
gonna try to
mine.
look for one.
Here's mine from Lovable. Very, very kind invitation. Hit all the marks of the stuff I talked about. So, yeah, what do we think? Should I fly to New York or wait for the San Francisco one? Oh, there you go. Kind of the next Prince of Persia from McKinsey. Should probably get specific emojis. All right, all right. People writing things down. From Danielle, I hope you're doing well. Lots of offshore recruiters. Yes, getting a bunch of those. Let me admit a couple of others and then we'll get started. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I am so excited to have Kyle join me today. I've been a reader of his Substack for several years. I've been a contributor, and he's just, I think, the top voice in go-to-market and the reality of it versus the hype. So I'm really excited to talk to him today about AI outbound. How do we make that work for us rather than get these generic posts that people can kind of go through and see that it's just not the right thing for us. A little bit about me. I'm Elena Luneva. I've been in product for over 20 years, in various CPO roles at Nextdoor, at Brain Trust, at OpenTable, BlackRock, various companies you might know. And couple of years after Kyle, but a year ago, I went the solopreneur way. So I have a portfolio career. Now I teach, develop CPO level skills where we cover go to market. So I'm really excited to talk to Kyle about that. And then also application of AI for communication so that ideas can be heard rather than just scrubbed under the floor, as well as most recently adding an additional course for managing the builders that we're all need to be, but also thinking through how do you build non-deterministic systems and how does that MVP differ? So you can find those. I'll send some of those links. But let me pass over to Kyle and to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kyle Poyer. I was a longtime VC, so I was an operating partner at a firm called OpenView for almost 10 years. OpenView invested relatively early in companies like Datadog, Calendly, Expensify, Exonius, JumpCloud, a bunch of great companies. I'm currently a solopreneur. I write a newsletter called Growth Unhinged, which reaches about 80,000 operators. It's a weekly newsletter covering just kind of the latest and greatest in growing your software tech company more generally. A lot of data there, a lot of kind of practical tactics. And then I also spend the other half of my time advising and consulting with startups. Working on things like monetization, building go-to-market strategies, and optimizing the funnel more broadly.
That's awesome. So happy you're here. So first, wanted to just ground us in that signal problem. So we've all just got a couple of those emails that were a little too AI-ish. So exactly right. So you write a lot about that intent signal. So the hiring patterns, the tech stack, behavior triggers. But that signal to noise is exploding, especially with everybody doing everything with AI. So when you think about just go-to-market leaders, chief product officers, how do you think about the signals that are worth building infrastructure around?
Well, and Yeah, maybe it's worth even just going back and looking at some of the emails people put in.
Yeah.
I feel like from my experience, like one of the things is like trying to avoid sounding like some of those emails, right? And so some of those emails, in my experience, are like oddly specific. So like almost makes AI is like doing research on you. They're gonna like read your latest LinkedIn post or read the transcript from the last podcast you were on, and then they're gonna write a custom email that just seems like creepily specific, and you're like, this is, yes, you seem to know something about me, but it's like I'd almost rather a generic email than like something that's creepy. So that happens a lot. Another thing that happens is like AI seems like it knows you, but it actually gets the signal wrong. So it thinks it has a
Mm.
hypothesis around what you're interested in or what your industry is, and you're like, you just clearly, if you looked at my website or spent more than like 30 seconds on this, you would know it's like I'm not a talent shop. And so you'll see that happens a lot. And then I think just the other thing is that over time, Outbound went from something that was rare, like it was unusual to get an email from someone you didn't know, to now just so common we all probably get dozens of emails a day. I mean, I run a solopreneur business. I have no employees, and I get all kinds of outbound slop, and so just the cost of doing it have come down, and that I think we're just inundated. And so I think the other thing that comes up to me is that the bar for sort of relevance and quality is much higher than before. But then to your point about signals, I think signals might be the way we get out of this,
Mm.
hopefully.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to share some data real quick, and that I've been interviewing and surveying go-to-market leaders around where they're investing in 2026 in go-to-market. And so this is showing sort of last year what channels were core and what were experiments for them. So core things last time around were actually LinkedIn, SEO, and warm outbound. And we'll get into warm outbound versus intent outbound as we go. And the top experiments were actually intent-based outbound was number one. So a lot of people are kind of working on this, trying to figure it out. AI discovery was number two, and then conferences was actually number three. So, and I think of all of
Mm.
these as very sales-led go-to-market strategies. One final thing I'll just share as I'll scroll down here. Actually, all right.
Any chance to zoom in a little bit,
This one.
Barbara? Or is
Yes,
that too
hopefully
too
that
hard?
people can see
There we go.
this.
There we go. Love it.
Uh, we scored these channels based on the popularity. So what percentage of uh, tech companies were doing it versus how likely they were. If you were doing it, how likely was it for it to have an impact? And interestingly, despite all of the noise, despite all of the kind of seeming saturation, this sort of tried and true bucket, the things that are working for a lot of people consistently, intent-based outbound
Hmm.
and warm outbound were actually in that upper right corner. And so there's clearly something here that works. And let's talk about it.
People are trying. People are definitely trying, right? I love that
Exactly.
breakdown. So what when you ran that, what was surprising for you, or is it consistent with what you were thinking?
So what was surprising for me is so there were a lot of programmatic things like the intent-based outbound or warm outbound that were in that top right. But then the other things that were in
Yeah,
that top right, one of them was intimate events. So things like dinners.
right.
And I think that what in an age of AI, like it's these in-person experiences are actually a lot more valuable. But I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is like the you have an offer essentially, like what are you trying to offer people to get them to respond to your note, and you have the distribution, right? So the target list of who you're trying to go after and the message that you're sending them, and you need to find that fit because the outbound is going to be more of the audience and the message that you're sending them. The offer is what gets them to convert, and I think that when you
Sure.
compare those, that's when a lot of magic can happen. And so I think that when some people will look at their outbound as not working, well, it's like, well, you're immediately emailing these people who have no idea who you are, and you're trying to sell them an ERP. Like, really, you
Yeah.
should lower the expectations and try to maybe invite them to a dinner with their peers in that sounds really compelling, or maybe invite them to a webinar or a community event or drinks at a happy hour at a conference you're attending, or just have an introduction about sending them some insights about their business. I think lower if you can lower that, make the offer more compelling and make it easier to say
Mhm.
yes. That can bring someone into pipeline even if they don't convert to pipeline right away.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about in your writing about just the ICP, who your ideal customer persona is, and how do you find that, and the various tools, AI tools to actually understand that from signals. Like when I talk about it in my course, the go-to-market section, a lot of the signals you already have, like in your sales pipeline, in the customer success pipeline, and you can put AI over that to really extract who the people are, what are those emails. So even all the things that Kyle is talking about, the physical dinners, I don't know if we can really get AI to help us with that, but maybe you found some ways. You can do a lot of that, like farming or understanding of your customer upstream.
Well, and I guess I mean I'm even curious, like from your experience, like the signals we used to have available from my vantage point, like if we were to try to build a target account list, it was hard to get accurate data. Like we might get good data on the company, but like really even things like industry fields were kind of junk for a while. Company
Yeah,
size fields were often junk. So it's like really hard to get data on both the companies and the right people at those companies. And uh and you couldn't trust anything that went a little bit below like super service level. So like geo was maybe fine. Size was like okay, but like once you got even into like a sub industry, good luck.
yeah,
And if you're trying to go after the SMB, it was like there was just no data available. That was
absolutely.
always my experience until probably like 3, 4 years ago. Or did you? Or yeah, how have you seen that change over time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think having those conversations with sales and marketing with the, I don't know, definitely continued. But I think the unlock for us at Brain Trust was looking at actual sales call data and pulling out the transcripts from Gong so that we can do more of that semantic search layer on top to build clearer profiles from the copy rather than from what we thought was happening or what we were mining externally, and adding adding those internal signals and adding that qualification to what we can then continuously pull externally. I think that got us much tighter on the profiles and sort of the anti patterns, the ones that we were
Mm.
spending a bunch of time on versus not actually closing.
Yeah, I think getting so there's a famous meme around like target accounts where people compare Prince Charles to Ozzy Osbourne because they're both British, they're both wealthy, they're the same age, like they are on paper, it like a lot of the signals would show that they're the same segment. When the reality is like they have very different needs, they're and very different personalities. And I think that the same thing ends up happening with target accounts. And so just over-indexing on things like they're based in the US and they have over 1,000 employees. Even if you add an industry field, like they're in the tech industry, it could just be totally useless. And so what I found is that the next layer was often sort of trying to figure out like growth signals and tech stack signals. And so are they
Mm-hmm.
using Salesforce? Are they using like what's their website provider? You can often scrape a lot of the tools that companies are using, and I think that initially the scraping was done based on where there was connections to like what the website, because you can kind of like pull that in easily. Now there's a lot more automated scraping based on job posts because job posts often mention the tech that you want employees to be familiar with. And so
Right.
if you
Mm-hmm.
see that a company has a competitor, that's an interesting signal. If you see that they have a company that you integrate with, it's a great signal. And so some of these fields are starting to become interesting. Other
Hmm.
things that
Hmm.
come up, and so funding, for example, it used to be an interesting signal because if someone had a new funding round, that often meant they were growing or about to invest in growth. I think the nowadays that's just become so widely available that that has become commoditized. And so we're constantly looking for these signals that like take us a little bit closer to figuring out the difference between Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, but that where everyone doesn't have access to. And that is the that is the big challenge for both product teams and go-to-market teams is the highly relevant signal that is custom to you that you can find before all of your competitors have access to the same information.
I love that. And I mean, maybe they are buying the same tech stacks. Maybe the AI is onto something. Prince Charles and Osbourne. They're probably investing in companies. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and I
Maybe
think
it's
so.
something.
I do think tech signals are still helpful. I mean, that helps you figure out if they're like even relevant or not. Are they investing in technology? Other signals for me that are like things that people could think about. So one would be, I would say like I delineate them into warm outbound and intent-based outbound. And what I mean by warm outbound is like they're showing signals of a relationship with your company or your brand. And that's normally highly
Hmm.
proprietary to you because like if they're on your website and you can de-anonymize them, that's
Right.
information you know, but your competitor doesn't know. So they're showing a signal of intent, but it's more of like a relationship intent. So other signals of more warm outbound signals might be they're following one of your founders on LinkedIn or they're engaging with the content that your team puts out. They're like they're connected to people. Maybe they were at an existing customer and they moved roles to a new company.
Hmm.
Well, that's a
Hmm.
warm outbound target as well. And so these warm outbound, I think, plays, what makes them really interesting is like, you know, that competitors are not going after this. There's a time trigger where you know there's like some level of interest and there's at least familiarity with your brand. And I find like when you have these signals, you actually don't need that fancy of copy or like a message to send these people. And I even just try to keep the message pretty straightforward and simple and to the point. But like the signal is the main kind of store of value rather than the message. But then the intent-based data is a little bit different because that's
Hmm.
often things that are more widely available and that you can get wrong pretty quickly. And so with those, some of the examples that I've been finding are interesting lately. One is that when you scrape job post data, you can often see some of the internal priorities or initiatives at the company. That's a really interesting signal for outbound if some of the priorities are very tied to what your company does. One of the tools I find super useful around that is a company called Sumble. Let's drop their name in the chat. This is like a former AI, like data science founder that's now moved into go-to-market tech, and their kind of claim to fame is providing the best data around job posts and
Hmm.
using that for intent-based outbound. I'm not an advisor there. I'm not paid by them. I just like what they're doing.
Maybe you should
Um,
be.
so that's yeah, but that's like one type of route. But then other things are that there's other sort of signals that are relevant to what your product does. So one thing that I recently talked to the team at Safety Culture. So they do safety like inspection software, and they
Uh-huh.
can pull public data on OSHA health and safety violations at different workplaces. And so they actually get tens of thousands of free product signups a month, but then they match those free signups with data on OSHA health and safety violations. And that's what's one of the signals that helps the sales team prioritize the highest opportunity leads. And they do run automated campaigns to those people, but they'll also run more personalized campaigns if the signal is strong enough that this is like a VIP level account.
That really connects then the intent with the signals, as you mentioned. I think another example that I've come across is that The Slack example. So when Microsoft was launching Teams, they kind of got ahead of that by analyzing Microsoft's distribution advantage, their sort of 300 million Office subscribers, and the 30,000 sales reps. And so the way that Slack really looked at how do you compete with that is finding that white space that Microsoft couldn't occupy. And what they did is very similar to what you're looking at is the job posting, the documentation language, the acquisitions they were making so that
Mm.
they could still stay relevant and outcompete for a while. So having those signals change really made an impact. The other thing for me and for product leaders, especially, is we are used to looking at sort of user research as the things that people want, but it's very episodic. When we combine that with all the things our go to market teams are doing, like the sales conversations, the outbound that's being made, that feedback combined with user research, I think helps then product teams build actual products that are useful and that people are asking for rather than really working off our own ideas. So that combination of signals and the timeliness of those signals is really powerful.
Yeah, I love that point around kind of refreshing things as the market and the competitive landscape changes. And a lot of companies treat some of these signals or like a target account list as fairly static, something that maybe they refresh once a year.
Mm,
And it can get stale a lot faster than that. One of the things that I like to do. So when I think about building a target account list and refreshing it, there's a back testing element where you can look at all closed won and all closed lost deals over a period of time. You can enrich those with different fields about that are hypotheses of what matters or what influences your target customer. Obviously, it can be hard to go back in time and find what those fields look like at the time of the deal. Some of them you can maybe hope have pre-populated from having done an enrichment back when someone signed up or became a lead. And some you just take the most recently available data. But when you do that, you can often run just a bunch of different cuts of the analysis or even a regression analysis to see which factors are most predictive of win rate. And the metric I tend to use is like expected revenue per 100 accounts. So if you had
okay.
100 of these accounts, what would be the win rate and what would be the average deal size within those accounts, and then the net revenue retention rate. And when you factor those in, that helps you figure out, oh wow, if we go after accounts in this type of industry or that had this signal, we actually could get 10x the revenue per account compared to if we went after these other types of accounts. And I think that type of back testing, it's historically just been like really hard to do and very manual. But now there's a lot more of an automated approach through, people can enrich their accounts with tools like Clay. There's
Yep.
tools like KeyPlay that can automate some of this process. There's a bunch of interesting kind of go-to-market automation tools that make this. I'd say now it's more of like a quarterly exercise or should
Mhm,
be.
mhm.
Might depend on how big your business is and how many accounts you have. But then the other thing is, yeah, as you had mentioned, like connecting to your Gong data, or everyone has some sort of note taker. I see like a million Fathom note takers in this, but essentially taking the transcripts from all of your past interactions from the last month or from the last quarter, and then AI is really, really good at synthesizing lots of data and drawing out themes from that, and then even sharing specific examples. So one of my favorite AI use cases personally is like I survey hundreds of people all the time. I'll ask things like, "What tools do you use?" or "What's the best growth initiative from the last year?" AI is great at feeding like tons of that qualitative data that I would never be able to analyze on my own and quickly drawing out themes. And so I would encourage folks to do that to see how their ICP might be changing over time.
And a lot of that, I think that there's the additional learning of that ANTA pattern. Where do people spend too much time and what's not working in the back testing that Kyle is talking about. We had a question from Hannah. Is email the best path for that outbound? What's been your experience?
That is a good question. So my take is like you essentially at this point, your outbound could be email, LinkedIn, cold calling, and direct mail. And I think that oddly enough, cold calling and direct mail are starting to come back a little bit more in style because it just shows like a little bit of extra seriousness and like
Hmm.
resource investment. And so if an account's like one of your top say 150 accounts, your highest priority, and you can tell that based on these signals, right? And building the account list. I would try to focus on essentially an all of the above strategy, but would prioritize cold calling, a direct mail campaign to the account, and then also email, but more personalized email as opposed to automated email. And then you could
Hmm.
also do LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And then I think of it as like you have maybe two other tiers of accounts that get some level of outbound. I'd say like the next tier, you're probably not doing, direct mail or cold calling, but you might do personalized seeming email plus LinkedIn. And then the final tier is maybe just automated outbound campaigns and, ideally tied to some of the signals that you have. But I think of email as probably the cheapest and lowest response rate, although obviously it can be higher if you have the right signal. LinkedIn is like the next cheapest and like probably slightly higher converting than email, and then cold calling and direct mail right now for what I'm seeing are higher than the other two, but it's also a higher cost per lead.
Hmm. Yeah. When I was at Nextdoor, and Nextdoor is a social platform, one of the ways we'd get other neighbors to sign up is letters sent to them from effectively their neighbors that are already on the platform and mentioning that. So combining that social proof with, hey, you are here and other people around you are already on this platform. And like Kyle mentioned, it was our most high performing channel, but it was expensive. So we constantly tried to figure out a better one, but that stayed the best one for us. And so when you think about just the what, and so all the AI slop that we are getting, how do you think about the guardrails that separate, stuff that looks like slop with stuff that looks personal enough without being creepy or weird, that hits the mark? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I like to do is run essentially like micro campaigns. Brendan Short is the one I heard about the term from, but with like that idea
Mm,
that if you can break down some of these accounts into 25 or 50 that are in a subset where you have a strong hypothesis around kind of the like uh, why now or like just some sort of pain point that's consistent across those people. I would run sort of more custom plays that feel a little bit more personalized because they're down to a pretty narrow subsegment, but then are, not one-to-one personalized. And that's what's going to allow you to scale this across like multiple groups. And so to me, that's a really interesting approach. The other thing is I do like some more programmatic campaigns where you can make the content or the offer feel really kind of custom and personalized, but it actually doesn't need that personalized of a message. I often find like
yeah.
the more you try to overdo the email to sound personal, the more it often does sound like AI. And so if the email message itself can sound a little bit like shorter to the point, like not overly creepy, but then the offer feels more custom. I think that is working. So one of the examples I've liked recently is there's a company called Inflection. It's like a next gen marketing automation product. And one
Mm,
of the things that they do for some of their customers is they help their customers run like weekend review emails for their users. And so Inflection actually was able to adjust a bunch of data on their target accounts and create like a mock week in review email about each account. And then they sent this as like, hey, here's a sample we can review email for you. Like, don't you wish you could power this essentially for your customers? That
Yeah,
felt very
smart.
personal, but it was actually programmatic, right? And even if they got some things wrong, like the idea of doing this was like it felt high value for the user and it felt like they were going above and beyond of making something for the recipient. And so when they launched that campaign, that was actually higher performing and booked more meetings than they had previously had two BDRs that, higher performing than their two BDRs were performing for over the, several months before that. And this just took some N8N credits as their automation provider and about a day for the founder to set up. So I think that that kind of ties into your next door experience too, right? Where it feels personal for the user, but it's more programmatic tied to other data that you have. I think that programmatic is still probably more effective than fully AI generated. Um, yeah, for maybe that'll change as AI gets better, but I think that there's just a lot of people have their BS detectors really high when it comes to AI generated copy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a programmatic version at Liquid Space, which was commercial real estate. And we sent presentations around sort of the savings we could get a company, but the data points were relatively limited. It was three or four things that we could get access to. Um, and they converted really well because I think they didn't have that level of creepiness, but we got the numbers right and we needed to make sure that we get the savings and the numbers correct. And we did that manual check around them. I know we have a couple of questions from the audience. Either Brandon or Niles, do you one of you want to say it aloud, or I can read
Yeah,
it for
maybe
you?
Brandon. Start with Brandon.
Sure. Yeah. It seems a little tangential now that we've kind of moved the conversation, but as you were talking, I was just thinking about one of the challenges that I'm having in a more of a startup business, which is where is the proper line between the sales and marketing disciplines? And I've heard
Mm.
pros and cons for both ways in terms of whether marketing should own the pipeline all the way through booking the meeting for sales or not. But just curious your thoughts.
My my thoughts on this have changed. I used to think, SDRs owned like outbound and then marketing owned more inbound. Now I think marketing leaders really should own all of pipeline. And that I think is the cleanest in terms of like it doesn't really matter what is automated and what's personal. What matters is like what influences your target accounts to get them to become pipeline. And how do you do that in a way that's like highest converting at the lowest cost per conversion or essentially lowest CAC. And so I find if teams that's like the cleanest approach. Now, obviously, the skill sets of who you have in leadership, personalities, experience, all of that ends up kind of coming into play organizationally. But I just think it's so clean right now for marketing to own all of pipeline generation.
Yeah, I
Cool.
agree with
Appreciate
that.
that.
That end-to-end experience or that end-to-end ownership, I think really helps align the work to the outcomes.
There's also less like attribution challenges of like this was
Yeah,
marketing generated versus sales generated, and marketing's like
they gave
we
us
sent
bad
them,
leads.
they attended our event or they attended the webinar, and sales is like we booked the meeting, and yeah, you don't worry about that if it's just one shared pipeline goal.
Cool.
Exactly,
Thanks, guys.
exactly. Niles, do you want to? I think it was a big question. You want to ask maybe one of those?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Elena, Kyle. So, question for both of you, maybe. Yeah, so for B2B company providing individual software development for, let's say, specialized automotive and mobility domain, um, according to your view, Kyle, what is the best approach for the success, and where do you see kind of, the proportion rate of success in different approaches?
Uh, yeah, so I mean, hard to get like super tailored to like your exact scenario, but what I kind of heard just to summarize is like it is a very specialized ICP. It's like the mobility space, and automotive space, and it's a probably a high value offer because it's custom software development for these target customers. And so you're probably like this is probably a um, higher ticket sale, not like a super fast SMB sale. And so, with that in mind, I would probably try to have a hypothesis around what are some of the signals in maybe the automotive space that it makes someone really relevant for you? Maybe it's that are launching and they announced a new type of vehicle, and so that's going to mean more tech work than they have capacity for. Or maybe there's a new feature that a competitor launched that they can't match, right? That there's a software concern, or like there's some sort of like hypothesis around what's happening in the market that makes someone a good fit or a bad fit, and you could look at your existing customers as a basis for that. So I would maybe start there. Other places that might be more low-hanging fruit that you could run would be look up all of the alumni of your past clients and see if any of them are at a future client that you want to have access to. If you run outbound to those folks, like these are people that already know you, they know your work, and they can help you navigate the organization, hopefully. And so that's sort of an evergreen type of play that would apply to just about anyone. But yeah, I'll think about other ideas, but those would be two, places to start.
Yeah,
And
those are good ones.
where do you use AI in this process as such?
I would use AI more in like the sort of account identification and account research phase, as well as the research around your potential buyers. And so tools like Clay can help on the, account identification and account enrichment side, or like looking up alumni of your current clients and where they work. And then I'd say like from an account research standpoint, there would be tools like Clay that could help with that. And also the Sumble tool that I mentioned could help identify some of the priorities at some of your potential target accounts to see if they're mentioning priorities that you think align with these hypotheses of where you can help.
Yeah, that alumni angle of they've moved somewhere and they already have a positive experience, I think could go a long way. I think Julia, do you want to share your question?
Yeah, thank you. If you had your leads already coming in because you already have a certain outreach, but you had trouble bringing in more qualified, more
Mm.
warmer leads, that would lead to a shorter time in the pipeline. Where would you implement AI solutions first? What do you think would help most in bringing those leads warmer to you, so they're closer to the bottom?
Yeah, so essentially, how do you make sure that you're prioritizing the best ones, not wasting maybe sales time on bad fit leads? That's definitely a common challenge that comes up. I think that is there are some interesting agentic workflows around automating that lead scoring and qualification process. I think historically we would maybe look at things like, oh, how much did this person like download content? Did they attend a webinar? Like there's more uh, signals of like interest based on what they're doing on the site. Those are still somewhat relevant, but you might not have a ton of those. But like sign up source, for example, if it's like a ChatGPT sign up, that's often higher intent than someone that signs up like from maybe social media or a paid campaign, for example. So you could have like the internal data around activity and source going into your scoring. And then I think increasingly people are pulling in like a Zapier or an N8N to do some custom research on the account. So custom web scraping, for example, and have the AI agent take these signals and essentially make a recommendation for, hey, this is a highly qualified lead. This is a in between lead, or this is a clearly not a good fit lead. And so I think a lot of the automation providers are pretty good around some of those workflows. And I like the idea of having more of a human in the loop, particularly in the mid case. So the clear yeses, like you automatically go and schedule with them. The clear no's, you maybe put them in a nurture campaign, and then in between you have a human in the loop, maybe gets a Slack alert, and then the person can make a judgment call.
And there's an opportunity. I think you mentioned some of the tools around lookalike models. So Julia, if you have people that are going through and they are doing well, getting to the why, what is the profile, what are the signals that you can then hunt for externally to get similar types of clients that you can get into the pipeline and get them through. I think we have maybe time for one more. So I don't know, Kyle, if you have a favorite person to pick. Favorite's a strong word.
Maybe we'll just tackle a couple of these quickly. So I see Hannah had a question for solo founders targeting SMB mid-market. What's a reasonable workflow or amount of email/mail/LinkedIn messages to be sent a day? I'll just drop an outbound playbook from a very lean team that's more founder-led that might be helpful. But I think that founders need to kind of be doing both like founder-led marketing and founder-led sales in these early days. But I think something like, sending, my guess would be like 20, 25 messages per day, but pairing that with something that's like founder-led marketing or founder-led brand building, where they're building in public, posting publicly. So there's like an affiliation with them as an individual, not just it's not just someone random reaching out. That would be my suggestion. And then Sumeru had a question: how does this intent-based model change if you also have a PLG or freemium motion? I think the big way it changes for me is you use product signals as a signal of intent, but you overlay that with like what you know about the account. And so it still has to be like an account that's big enough for like in your target geos. But if you can see, hey, product usage is increasing, or we have 5 users within the same domain, a lot of those product signals like make someone a really interesting product qualified lead. And that's more like the warm intent signals that we shared. Like the warm intent was, are they coming to your website, right? Or is there a prior relationship? Now, essentially, that prior relationship is that people are using the free experience. I think the big thing I would encourage folks to think about, though, is you can't just necessarily go outbound to your free users or your self-serve users and turn that into pipeline. It's often a different buyer. So you want to use signals from the free usages. These are the right accounts. You can reach out to them and have them help you navigate to the buyer, but you also might need to go top down to those accounts to kind of generate demand. And I have some plays in this post in case they're useful.
Yeah, let me make sure, and I'll get these from Kyle after we talk so that I can share them with you all in an email, and then write up some of the takeaways that we got in a Substack. So I'll share that going forward. But Kyle, this was so impactful, and I think all of us have a bunch of different both tactics and strategies to think about. So thank you so much for sharing and joining me today to talk through AI, where it works, where it doesn't work, and how to help companies grow and reach their customers. Really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good rest of your Thursday. Bye.